Beat Museum. We're here tonight because Gerd's here to see us.
Yes.
It's his birthday. Not tonight, but it's been his recent birthday, a month or two ago. But God bless us, we're all together, and I'm thrilled that he came to town. Gerd lives on the East Coast. And I'm Jerry Cimino, for those of you that I have not met. And I want to welcome everybody here to the Beat Museum. Before I talk about Gerd, I'll let you know what we're up to. We have been in this building for 13 years, and we are in the process of making some changes, and we don't know what they're going to be, frankly, because the building requires a seismic retrofit, which is going to cost a lot of dough.
Oh my God.
And the one thing that we're in danger of losing, which I'm terrified of, but I'm hoping we're going to raise enough money to make it go away. This space that we're currently sitting in right now doesn't meet standard current building codes.
Oh, really?
Can you imagine? The building's 110 years old, and we're grandfathered in because, you know, the building's been in operation. But once the seismic retrofit happens, there's a danger that we could lose the access to this space for the public, and it might have to become storage or offices or something. So we're trying to raise enough money to lower the floor or possibly raise the ceiling. I know.
Do you own the building?
No, boy do I wish I did.
But aren't those expenses on the owner?
Well, not necessarily. The owner has the option of just closing off this space and not really renting it.
Okay.
If they don't want to put the money into, you know, remodeling it to that extent.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if we want to make use of the square footage, we've got to include that in our tenant improvements. So we started a campaign, and we're trying to, you know, raise a boatload of dough. You can read about it at Kerouac.com. We talk about how we're possibly going to have to close for 6 months, operate out of a pop-up somewhere, hopefully in North Beach, and then hopefully raise enough money to come back into the location. So,
Can I,
yes.
I don't want to get into any like financial details, but how is the fundraising going? Is it still like kind of slow, or is it getting?
You know what?
better?
This week it just started to take off, frankly. A podcast just came out. December is when philanthropists tend to make donations, so big spenders like you, Pat, can write those six-figure checks starting this month. And so there's a podcast that literally just hit today, and some of the poets here in North Beach are gathering, rallying around what we do because they use this space. They want to keep the space. So we're really really starting to kick off now, and I'm gratified for that. And we're going to continue to push on that. So thanks for your interest. But that's the business end. What we're here to do tonight is celebrate Gerd's 90th birthday, the fact that he's here on the West Coast. If I can take a point of personal privilege, I first met Gerd face to face. His reputation preceded him, of course, because of the whole story with the Beat Generation and how he was done wrong with the Neil Cassidy letter. I'm sure most of you, if not everybody, knows the story. So 10, 11 years ago, we had just opened up in this space, and I was working the register downstairs late at night, and this gentleman comes in, and we're talking for 30 or 40 minutes, and finally I didn't know him, but I realized he's been around it for so long, and I said, man, you know so much about the Beat Generation and all these various people. I'm Jerry Cimino, what's your name? And he goes, oh, I'm Gerd Stern. And I blurted out, Gerd, you're the guy that lost the letter. I mean, it was, and Gerd says to me, I did not lose that letter. I mean, he pounded his fist down. I gave it back to Allen Ginsberg. Alan's been blaming that on me for 55 years. And I gave it to him, and he lost it. And I thought, well, I'm treading on thin ice here. So we kept in touch, and he's been out a few times, and God, we've become friends. And
he's the first one who told me that the letter was found.
Wow.
That's right. You want to tell that story?
Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, what happened is when the letter was found, the auctioneers came to us and asked us to verify its authenticity. And I didn't believe it was found. I said, come on. I didn't fall off a truck. This thing's been missing for 55 years. You think I'm going to believe you just found it? because those of you who don't know, the legend was he threw it off or dropped it off his houseboat in Salisbury into the bay. And that was in the Parish Review. Kerouac spoke about it in 1968. So he lived with us all these years. So finally, when I was off of the non-disclosure agreement that I had to have signed in order to be a part of that thing, I had to make 2 calls the instant I realized that Reuters had dropped the news. The first call was to Kathy Cassidy, Neil and Carolyn's daughter, eldest, and I said, Kathy, you got to be aware of this, and your family, your brother and sister have to know this, because this is going to hit. You're probably going to get phone calls within an hour from the press, because this is big news. And then my second call, as soon as I hung up, was to Gerd, and I said, hey Gerd, it's Jerry in the Beat Museum. How you doing? Are you sitting down? And he goes, I'm lying down. I just got out of the hospital. And I said, good. So I said, you know, they found the letter. He goes, what letter? I said, the Joan Anderson letter. And Gerd just starts yelling. Wow, 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 wow. Boy, what a moment. And what a vindication.
Question, did you sell the letter, or was the letter sold?
Yeah.
The letter was sold at auction. We never owned it.
How much was it sold for?
Yeah, about $200,000, a little less.
And who purchased it, if I may ask?
Emory University.
Oh, Emory, of course, that makes sense.
So what was the story then about how the letter did get lost and where it was in those 50 intervening years?
The problem with the letter is several problems. Number one, was there only an original? Which is what Alan said. On the other hand, Jack obviously had part of it because he published part of it in the Paris Review, plus other journals grabbed onto it. I would have thought that Jack had had a copy, but that may not be true. You know,
Well, it's 19...
if he didn't have a copy, then he gave it to Alan, who gave it to me to deliver to Richard Emerson, who right now, sitting right behind you, Pat, is Horace Schwartz's son.
No, not son anymore, daughter.
What?
BPC, homie. I'm Horace's daughter.
Daughter.
I'm not his son anymore.
Oh, I thought Horace is...
In fact, I never was his son, but that's okay.
Okay. I prefer...
Offspring is fine.
I prefer... I generally...
No, that's right.
Because of who I am, I prefer daughters.
I know. Good, good.
So,
issue.
anyway, Horace Schwartz and Richard Emerson were living on the side of the hill in Sausalito, both of them poets, and not the only ones in that place, but, you know, Richard, to me, was a very good friend and a publisher, and he had the only private sound studio at that time, Amplex machines, which were quite valuable, and he had bought because he worked for Shell Oil in a very prestigious position. And it's only because of Horace's daughter that many generations or decades later, I found out that Richard, who was a three-piece suit person and with a wife and a wonderful house and a wonderful studio, who had recorded all of the poets that ever came into the San Francisco Bay Area for about a decade. He had, I would say, over 100, maybe more than 200 tapes, including all of us, including myself and Alan and Larry and anybody you can think of, Gregory. And apparently what happened is he lost his job, he lost his mind.
No,
He
he
wa-
just
he
lost
wa-
his job in his department.
He,
He did not lose his mind.
he became an alcoholic though.
He's been an alcoholic for years.
When I know him, I don't
Right.
recall that.
Yeah, okay, well,
But he lost his wife,
that was
he-
long before.
he lost his house,
Mhm.
and, you know, for somebody of his generation and his reputation, I couldn't believe it when his daughter, Horace's daughter, told me Horace was already gone.
No, Horace went later.
He went later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I add something?
Yeah.
Richard Wirtz Emerson left a note. You know, he hanged himself in the closet of his apartment, which was at Fox Plaza, when he got the eviction notice. The note consisted of the words of the song Joe Hill,
Oh my God.
which was completely shocking to me because I always thought of him as a rocker conservative. And let me just add one thing. I will always be grateful to him because he bullied me into reading the ABC of reading. Which I was I'll just add, I was a fanatical young communist. And when the communist poet Hugh McDermott said we could read Pound, I went to the communist newspaper and demanded that they publish an essay in defense of Pound. And they said, wait a while on that one.
What year was that when he hung himself?
Actually, I don't have the record. There was no obituary. I believe it was 1980. I'm still trying to confirm it because there's no obituary, no death notice. I have to go down to the medical examiner's office. And I think it was 1988. My father talked about it a lot. So
If I could use this moment as a sidebar to segue into something related. One of the things that Gerd was mentioning was the recordings that were done. And we have a late arrival who's kind of tied up in the middle of all of this because the guy who recognized the fact that the Joan Anderson letter was from Neil Cassidy to Jack Kerouac as opposed to Jack Spinoza, who's Gene Spinoza's dad, is with us. He just walked in the door. This is Mike McQuaid right here. And I think that Mike brought something for you, Gerd.
This is very related to what you're talking about.
Wow. Thank you, Michael.
You should open it. It's if
Okay.
here you want me to.
All right. Anyway, so, you know, this gets very complicated. There are so many people in this room who go way back. I mean, sitting right in front of me is Ramon Sender, who I've known.
Who's going to help you here?
Oh, he's still good.
Very good.
Never leave home without the click.
That was good, Ramon. Way to go.
These I was called over by Gene Spinoza, who was Jack Spinoza's daughter, after he passed away, to go through the house and try to find anything valuable. And I did. I found the Joan Anderson letter, and then it turned into kind of a whole legal mess. But this was part of the lot of records that Jack Spinoza had in his house, because they were produced by Gold Coast Records.
that was Richard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gerd, can you hold it up so we can get a shot?
Yeah, the truth.
Yeah.
The truth about these records is that the reason they were made is because the columnist Herb Cain was a very close friend of mine. I persuaded Herb to make recordings of San Francisco as a destination and San Francisco at Christmas time. And Jack Spinoza, who was a friend of Richard Wirtz Emerson's, Jack Spinoza had the record company. Richard really was more into taping rather than making records, but Jack was into making records. and that was Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And I knew Jack, but not very well. And it wasn't until a few years ago that when Jerry called me, that he mentioned the name Jean Spinoza, and that she came to New York for the auction of when it didn't happen, of the latter, because the first auction didn't take place. Nobody would bid enough. So then I met Jean, and she persuaded me that I must have known her father, and she was right. Although I had, that escaped me because it was, one thing. And
So somehow Richard Emerson, when he closed down